There is another parallel narrative that is being consciously built on in the recent past. Carnatic music is like an elite club. It has got its own barriers, and it is doing a gatekeeping job as well. The other narrative which has also taken ground is to strip off its shastriya element and the divine element, the divine roots of this music. For instance, just a few minutes back, you said, I will sing a Todi. Perhaps you may not like it because it is sung by me. So it is just to appreciate Todi for the point of view of Todi and not for the fact that Tyagaraja has composed on Sri Rama on every swara of this raga. So that element is seen as something which can be avoided, and it's only music for the sake of music. So these two narratives, I would like to hear what your thoughts are about.
Barriers to entry in Carnatic music. First of all, people who claim that there are barriers to entry, there are people who are rationalists. Those rationalists do believe in evidence-based theory. Now, can the people who say that there has been barriers to entry give concrete examples of either people who were really good, but they belong to a different affiliation and therefore they were not given opportunities? Because there are only counters to it. The one musician who is considered the greatest of all times, along with my grandfather, is Sri Rajaratnam Pillai. Right? He transcends all caste, language, every barrier. I mean, every musician is like a slave to his music. Right? And I mean, if you are talking about entry barriers, then why should John Higgins be performed? Or why Sheikh Chinna Maulana? What about KJ Das? What about Mandolin Silvas? What about Dakshinamurthy Pillai, the person who is considered the greatest percussion player ever by admission of my own grandfather and Paini Subramania Pillai? What about Paini Subramania Pillai? What about Rajamanikam Pillai? What about Tanjavur Murugabhupathi? Like C.S. Murugabhupathi. Now, if you take these musicians, we appreciate and we revel in their music, not because of what background they come from. We revel in music for the music's sake of it. So the first point of barrier entry in terms of performance is totally debunked. It doesn't have evidence to it. Number two, has there been any evidence of people who belong to a different community who might have wanted to listen to Carnatic music but they were stopped, either directly or indirectly? I have not known of anything. I know of anything either. Has there been explicit or implicit way in which people have refused to teach? People belonging to so-called a different community or whatever. Now, if you point out at certain things, you have to give clear reasons. For example, if that person belonged to a different community and he or she did not practice enough, then that doesn't count as that person belonging to a different community and therefore not being taught. So we have to have a level playing ground on saying that the only isolating factor which stops someone from teaching someone else is this. You have to hold other things the same. It's like a partial differential, right? So you have to be very careful about that. Now, there are no known incidents of the same rationalists who claim that this has been exclusive, right? Now, by this, am I saying that is Carnatic music a field that it can come as clean as it can be? Probably not. I mean, no field can be ideal, right? I mean, are you trying to say that if you are able to point out at some other field, let's say you are able to point out at sports and say that, you know what, Carnatic music should follow something like what is happening in sports, or Carnatic music should follow something like what is happening in films, right? Carnatic music should follow something like which is happening in journalism, or something that is happening in corporate world, something that is happening in bilaterals and multilaterals, something that is happening in academia. What is a good example that Carnatic music is such an outlier in this? That is a question. I'm not saying it is the idea. There could be stray incidents. But if you take those stray incidents and for your own narrative, if you take the outliers and say that this is the rule, then that is problematic and that is criminal in nature. It's a total disservice to the entire art and entire field, right? And coming to think of it, if you're talking about movies, those people who are propagating Tamil, right, in their movies, in their own productions, they bring in people who don't talk Tamil and make them as if there are not enough people who speak Tamil to act in the movies. So that is a kind of hypocrisy that people they fail to, they are being oblivious to it, right? So the two things here are If you look at evidence, do you have evidence? The answer to me is as yet no. Right? There are no concrete evidences. Number two, the other side of the story is that does that mean that it is as clean as it can get? We don't know. There could be incidences, but if there are, they would happen to be like exceptions as in any other field. That is the point that I'm trying to make. If I may just add one more thing to whatever I said earlier in terms of access entries, there is this kind of creating an artificial demand, force fitting demand is something which is not going to work. For example, this is an example that I usually give. Let's say there is a fish market in which a certain seller or certain group of sellers suddenly say that, you know what, fish is not being consumed by certain communities like the Saiva Pillais or Saivamars or Brahmins. So until these communities consume fish, then there is no point in saying that fish sales are good. How absurd can it be? Also, there is demand. People are going to consume it. And I am going to, at the risk of being like very, very particular on this incident, I've had so many friends who have attended the concerts that happened in the beach area a few years back, and they have come to me saying that, and I'm also a witness to that. So I can say for sure, and I can validate whatever they said for years together, that there were so many people who came and said that who asked for this? We are not even able to carry out with our simple life. There has been incidents that way. But I am forced to say this now. Not that we didn't know this before. We are being very moderate and we have been kind enough to not even give importance to such things. Whereas the other side is actually picking the exceptions and saying that, you know what, this is the norm. But if I actually get into the details of this, then it's going to expose a lot of pseudo stuff that's trying to, uncover itself.
As you have very beautifully narrated this activist aspect without taking names or making it specific. In fact, today's news, if we see the John F. Kennedy's Center for Performing Arts in Washington, there is a big uproar ever since the dispensation at the helm of affairs today has taken it over, and the board members have got changed. Why I'm narrating or relating this to it is, whereas music has been the art form of expressing bhakti, elevating consciousness in the Oriental side, in the Occident, it has always been the medium of activism turned into perhaps off late wokeism. So this brings back to my older question, without harping more on the wokeism part, is today there is a strong narrative that the music is for the sake of art. It is music for the sake of music. Divinity is perhaps something avoidable. It has been accidental or at best incidental. So music for the sake of music is the devotion to music. What are your takes on that?
A few aspects here. First, there are different kinds of music. When you just talk about music, not Carnatic music, not Shastriya music, when you talk about music, obviously it transcends all barriers. It doesn't have language, it doesn't have background, it can communicate to anyone. All that is fine. But you are talking about a specific kind of music which is called Shastriya music. Okay. The reason why it has this unique identity is because compared to any other genre of music, this is a kind of music which has its roots to bhakti and devotion, right? This doesn't mean that a person who doesn't believe in God or who doesn't have bhakti should not practice it. There have been cases in which a lot of atheists have been successful artists. There are a lot of atheists who are successful artists, and I won't be surprised if time to come there will be a lot of atheists. But those atheists don't have the right to say that the Carnatic music was not born out of bhakti. That is something which I have a problem with, right? Now, I can sing a song on anything. I can sing a song on this laptop, right? In proper Suddha, right? Therefore, okay, where is the bhakti component to it? Well, the Suddha that I employ to compose this song on laptop is obviously inspired by the compositions which were created by people, which was created out of bhakti. So indirectly, I have to owe my due, respects to the source. The source is what? Purandara Dasa did not compose Rama 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 because Ramprasad would sing it tomorrow. He composed it because of the bhakti he had. And Annamacharya composed his compositions, Tyagaraja composed his compositions, Trinities, Alvas, and Ayamas, those people who composed compositions, they created out of the bhakti they had, not because of someone who is going to make money out of it. I'm making money out of it, no doubt. But the least I can do as a musician is to acknowledge that whatever I'm making money out of has a source to bhakti. That is the least I can do. It's like giving references, giving acknowledgement to the papers that you use for your academic journals. That is the least that we can do. I am not for the argument that bhakti is not required. You don't have to have bhakti, but you have no right to say that Carnatic music, sans bhakti, is also enjoyable. Then what is it? It's like saying tomato soup, but it doesn't have tomato. Then what is it? It's soup. So say that you are singing music. Don't say you are singing Carnatic music. Carnatic music offers you, the Shastriya music offers you scope at different levels, right? You can explore the grammatical part of it. You can explore the technical aspects of it. Be great at it, right? That doesn't mean or that doesn't confer you the right. However great you may be technically, it doesn't confer you the right to say that it doesn't require bhakti. Whether you like it or not, that could be a personal choice. But it has its origin, its roots are divinity.
One of the early compositions of Mozart, he came into popularity when he had overheard a piece played in the church, which was only confined to the clergies of the church. When he heard it, memorized it, came out and started playing it, it attracted listeners, and there was an awe associated with it. But whether we like it or not, all of the classical music that we say have had some religious component as a genesis right from its beginning, be it even in the Western genre also. The other thing is, of late, there is one beautiful producer who has created the raga composition called Beethoven Priya. That also comes out from Beethoven's that symphony called For Elise, where he would have composed it in a different way, but then he had to give it as a bhakti shade. Tiruvarul Peruvai, Tiruvarul Taruvai, Murugane, something like that. It goes in the Tamil part. So quintessentially, this comes back to the form to which it has been anchored, which you had rightly said it in your own words. Just to going forward, where I find you as a rare combination with a PhD and a traditional music performer. Okay, and of course with an envious lineage, I must say, if I may say, use that term, and a tutelage, envious lineage and a tutelage. So, do you think today, if we talk of see music today, is it becoming too cerebric, and even with youngsters making it too mechanical, notwithstanding their talent? Or do you see even the so-called conventional performances at the crossroad of skill versus craft? So, do you see the role of social media affiliation to specific groups, the superstar culture?
If I may have to trace it back to a few decades or even probably in the last century, you had all kinds of musicians who were extremely technically prowess, but who could not connect with the audience. And on the other end of the spectrum, you had people who could easily connect with the audience, but they didn't have much respect with the co-artists because it was way too simplified. So it was very easy for replication by other artists. And you had some people in between who had the mix of great technical skills. At the same time, the capacity to attract people through a connect which is, in for lack of better word, which is divine in nature, right? Which cannot be expressed, which cannot be quantified. For example, in near Tanjavur, when Madhura Mani used to perform concerts, after 8 p.m., the rickshaw wallahs never used to take sawaris. They used to say, Iyer Padra Nanga, right? So just imagine a person who is able to captivate a normal rickshaw wallah. Through what? I mean, did he dilute anything? He was singing the same Kana Kankodi, whether he would sing it in the same village or he would sing it in Bombay Shanmugananda, right? Or in Chennai or Asaba. So there was no dilution there, right? Even if he would sing in a temple, it would be the same thing. Whether he would, there are so many marriage concerts. There is absolutely no dilution. Just because it has to reach to the masses, they didn't do anything different. Now, why am I saying all these things? I have to address a bigger, umbrella here before I get to the specific point. This kind of intellectualizing everything has become a very fancy thing, right? Um, if you look at artists, I'll just talk about how this appetite for intellectualism is for artists, rasikas, and organizers. Okay, because that will help you set the tone of why, or it will set the tone for the spirit of your question, if I may. Now, rasikas, a lot of them fall prey to this experimentation, fancy intellectualization, all that stuff, because subscribing to that makes you indirectly an intellectual. You may not have thought enough about it at all, right? But when I say 1,000 times this is intellectualism, this is intellectualism, and if you are going to support me, then you are going to be called a person who supports intellectualism. Therefore, you are an intellectual. How easy can it become, right? And then it becomes fancy to say that, you know what, I care only about the music, I don't care about the ideology. And if you see, these are the same set of rasikas who would be lauding India for taking a stance of not playing in Pakistan. If you can enjoy music for the music's sake of it without ideology, why can't you enjoy a game of cricket for the sake of cricket without the geopolitical reasons? So they really don't think about this. I saw so many social media posts that my students forwarded, which said that, you know what, we have to applaud India for not playing in Pakistan. Well, you are the same person who said that, you know what, I'm able to isolate the musician from the music. Where is your stance? Where are you actually? Right? So it's such a fancy thing. If you call yourself an intellectual, it becomes, it has so many brownie points to you. That is one. That is from the Rasika side. From the artist side, well, there are certain individuals, okay, certain young artists who have been vocal about certain things, especially the last year when certain institutions came up with their own priorities of artists. And unfortunately, those few were actually youngsters relatively. Even now, I am talking to you about the current state of affairs, wherein artists who are much more, who have achieved much more than me by light years, those who are in 80s, those who are in 70s, those who are in 60s, they are not being interviewed. You are interviewing me, someone who is in 40s. Isn't this a sad state of affair for Carnatic music? Shouldn't we be thinking about this? And the ones that I'm talking about, they have absolutely nothing to lose, right? They have seen everything in terms of money, in terms of fame, in terms of the vidwat. I mean, uh, they are all like about 100 times of whatever I could have achieved at this age, right? But still, I am talking about it, which is pretty sad. It's pretty sad when you think about it. Then what kind of, you know, what is being set for youngsters to follow? Right? Beyond music. Music is one thing. After a point, you have to set some precedents for youngsters to follow when there is some kind of a crisis or when there is some kind of an issue. That's what the greats did. You talk about a Ramanathan or a GN sir or a Padma Mani Iyer. They had clear stats. That is not happening now. Second part of artists who are like, I mind my business. I'm not asking anyone to do anything. I'm not encouraging anyone. But if I'm caught, I go play, I share the stage. How easy? Is it responsible enough? Is the question. My friend, he's a murderer. It's fine. I'm not encouraging him to murder. No way. I am not encouraging him to do any kind of antisocial activity. But we have been like, since childhood, we have been having lunch together. I'll continue to do. So many of my friends who belong to this category, when a lot of people who asked me, a lot of wrestlers who came and asked me, have they sold their dignities for money, for opportunity, for power, for connects, for network? I have no answer. I mean, what would I say? How would I defend them? I know them personally. I know their personal stance. But look at the optics. How am I going to defend them? How will you defend them? They are great humans, I know that. But what kind of signal does it send? Even their own sishyas, what kind of signal they send to their sishyas. That is the second point. Third point about the organizations, by and large, organizers still stick to traditional music and the Padhati kind. And in fact, in the last few months, there have been instances where organizations have been pretty critical of certain artists not trying to abide by certain rules and all that stuff. So that probably is something which could be considered encouraging for people who believe in traditional stuff. And this is the background with which we are operating, coming to your question, which is what is happening to the current crop of getting affiliated to this intellectualism. My grandfather, of course, and my father, who's my guru, he used to say, concert after concert, it could be just a minuscule, but has there been an improvement from one concert to the other? That is the first question as artists we need to ask. Over time, like when I look back at the last 5 years, when I look back at how I sang in 2019 or 2020, compared to how I sang in 2024 or 2025, if there is no significant leap, then something is wrong, right? Now, there is a limit to intellectualism, right? Because it is like magic. You can keep watching magic shows for some time. Beyond that, what is the substance? What is it? What is it that truly connects you? That truly that something that connects you is something which is not quantifiable. So, for example, sometimes J Sudha just stands in one note. Okay, that is enough to fill the space. How can you quantify that? Is that a technique or SPB, who is not formally trained as anyone, right? When he sings some kind of a devotional song and certain phrases that he sings, it just fills your ears and it has a connect which you cannot explain. And those are the artists whose work stands out. Even today we talk about Mother Mani Iyer, even today we talk about GNSR, even today we talk about Ariyapudi Ramanathan, not because, of course, they had their technical strengths, obviously, otherwise, you expect a bare minimum of technical prowess for people who have achieved. So that's a bare minimum, that's the baseline. Okay, don't get me wrong here. I'm not saying that you start with zero technical prowess. No, absolutely not. But over time, what you need to keep adding should be a reflection of your life experiences, basically, which is like as you get old, you are expected to get wiser. As you're expected to get wiser, you are able to even address those things which are not quantifiable. And that quotient is what is bhakti. So Shamuni Sinasari used to say, it seems that once when father and I, we used to visit him very regularly. My father was talking about his Smarani Sukumu. He used to sing. He said one of his, I don't remember, some friend or some friend's grandson or someone. So he played a recording of Shamuni Sinasari's Smarani Sukumu from 1940s, it seems. And he said that he could not sleep for like about 3 weeks because it was so bad. For someone like Shamuni Sinasari who doesn't change even a small spot of a Sangati, you can listen to his Smarani Sukumu from his 1940s to till his death. There will be no change, not even an iota of change. Then what has changed if it's not a technique? I'm talking about just the song, not Manodharma. So it means that the more you think about it, the more refined it gets. And what is that? That is bhakti. The more you start to understand and revel in the part that, you know what, Smarani Sukuma, I have to think of this Rama, the more you get attuned to that is when you are able to start expressing what bhakti component is. So my grandfather used to talk about how when Paramacharya, when he utters Narayana, it has so much of vibration. Whereas if I say Narayana, it sounds so flat. Why is that? Because the number of times he has repeated Narayana over and over and over and over again, millions of times, gives that depth. So when he says Narayana, he realizes Narayana. What is the technique here? What is the intellectual prowess here? No, it is a realization. So our culture has been always giving importance to this kind of experiential values and intellectual values. So people who are in, I mean, you know this more than me. People who are experts in Nyaya, they will not even consider Tarkam to be anything close to that. It's like a prerequisite. And we are still here in Tarkam itself, talking about intellect, talking about arguing, talking about, Vivad and all that stuff. So there's so much to go, even in Nyaya, and then it goes to experience. Then you imagine Sachidanandam, right? So that's the spectrum in which, because that's what your Sangeetam is supposed to take you to. Sachidanandam is what you ideally would want to get to. So if you're in intellect, always, when are you going to elevate beyond that? Right? So this is something which I find strange because the youngsters are amazingly brilliant. When I take a case of someone who is in his or her 20s or 30s, whatever he or she could do in probably two concerts, it may take like about few months for me to work hard and get the same output. That is one thing that is clearly appreciable. But are you able to connect at an emotional level is something which we need to wait.
Given a comprehensive reply, especially when you recollected the interaction or the Paramacharya's utterance of Narayana. So it is not in simple words that in our tradition we say that Achinoti cha shastrartham आचरे स्थापयत्यपि स्वयं आचरते यस्माद् आचार्यः तेन च उच्यते. So that because he's not simply called as Paramacharya for no reason, and that same thing applies even for all the so-called acharyas. Another giant that you refer to is Shammangudi. So people have internalized that music and has come to that level where they can be self-critique and aspire for even going better.